Now our Campaign 98 coverage continues with a debate between the candidates for governor of Alaska. Incumbent Governor Tony Knowles faces a number of challengers in this hour-long event hosted by KTUU-TV in Anchorage.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our continuing coverage of Decision 98. We have two debates tonight. Later, a debate between the candidates for U.S. House, but first, the race for Alaska governor. Joining us tonight, 6 candidates. I'll begin from left to right in alphabetical order. Representing the Green Party of Alaska, Erica Disa Jacobson. Next to her, representing the Democratic Party, Governor Tony Knowles. Next to him, the winner of the Republican primary, John Lindauer. Next to him, representing the moderate Republican Party, Ray Metcalf. Next to him, Sylvia Sullivan, who won the primary under the Alaska Independent banner. And next to her, State Senator Robin Taylor, a write-in candidate now endorsed by the Alaska Republican Party. Mr. Taylor is invited because he is the endorsed candidate of the Republican Party, and he received the second highest number of votes for the Republicans in the primary. First of all, candidates all, thank you very much for taking your time tonight to be with us. We'll begin with opening statements. Because of the large number of candidates, we are limiting our opening statements to 45 seconds. Based upon a drawing at Channel 2, we'll begin with the opening statement of Robin Taylor.
John, thank you. I have a dream for Alaska where we have stable family support resource jobs, where we protect our families and educate our children, where every child comes out of the 3rd grade knowing how to read, where the permanent fund is not only protected, but we make certain that working Alaskans aren't burdened with a big government, where we manage our fish and game without federal interference, where we are proud of our roads and our transportation system, where we provide and protect recreational access. A governor willing to work with the legislature and work with our congressional delegation. For 14 years, I've consistently worked toward these goals, and as your governor, Alaska will have a bright future. You now have a choice between a liberal agenda and a mainstream conservative Republican.
Senator, I hate to cut you off, but we are limited to 45 seconds. Ray Metcalf,
I had it at that.
You have the next opening statement.
Thank you, John. When we started this campaign, I said that our primary objective was to secure enough votes to gain official recognition for a new political party. I stated that unless Tony slipped on a banana peel before November and John shot himself in the foot a few more times, I probably wasn't going to be your next governor. Well, things are looking up. John shot both feet off, and at our last debate, Tony stepped right in the middle of one of my bananas. Tonight, we're going to have a 2-banana debate here tonight, Tony, and we're going to get to the bottom of that question that we talked about at the last debate. And I'm Ray Metcalf. I'm your ethical candidate for governor, and before this debate is over, you're going to know why. Thank you.
Thank you. John Lindauer.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a few days we're going to go to the polls. And when you step into the polls, you're going to have a very basic choice. If you want a liberal government in favor of gay marriages and gun control and locking up state lands, then the Democrats have a candidate for you. If, on the other hand, you want a governor who is pro-family, opposed to gun control, and in favor of opening up our state lands for recreation and hunting and mining and fishing and logging, someone who will reform CSED, someone who will impose a conservative agenda on the state and swing the pendulum away from the liberals and back to the conservatives, then I'd appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Disa Jacobson.
Thank you, John, and thank you for having each of us here. My name is Disa, and I'm the nominee for the Green Party ticket for the Green Party of Alaska. I'm running because 75,000 people come to Alaska to work from outside, while between 19 and 30,000 of our people are sitting around with their hands in their pocket, and I object to it. Furthermore, the clean water and sewer problems in the villages is growing worse and worse every day, and I also believe that subsistence is a basic, sacred, fundamental human right, and it is not negotiable. I am not in favor of a Republican-led legislature getting state management of subsistence back at all costs at the expense of the culture which belongs to the children of the Alaska Native people. Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvia Sullivan.
Yes, hi. I'm Sylvia Sullivan, and excuse me, I'm advocating for the labor in Alaska. There are 230,000 of us who have only seasonal employment. The governor that we have right now has done exactly what he said he was going to do, government partnering with business. In doing that, he has almost totally eliminated the unemployment from people when they get laid off. Myself individually, 15 times I've been denied my unemployment over a period of 5 years. These conditions, and this is through regulation, which is under the control of the governor, and I will change these and back to the way the law reads, and the people will get their benefits.
Thank you very much. Tony Knowles.
In the past 4 years, I have put Alaskans first. My priorities are good jobs, better schools, and safe, healthy children and communities. We've grown and protected the permanent fund and the dividend and cut the state budget. We have a stronger economy with more Alaskans working than ever before and a new pro-business attitude. We have better schools with new mandatory testing and standards and more funds to cut class sizes. And we have safe, healthier children and communities. With my Smart Start program, stronger laws, and more troopers, I'm working for zero tolerance for child abuse and neglect. Together, I think Alaskans can work for a better and building a better future.
All right. Thank you, candidates. The first hurdle is over. That's it for opening statements. When we come back, we'll open up the floor to our first question from our panel. Stay with us. And welcome back, everyone. Time now to begin our questions from our panel. I'd like to introduce the panel right now. Channel 2 News Assistant News Director Steve McDonald. Next to him, his co-anchor on the News Hour and the executive producer of Channel 2 News, Maria Downey, and our political reporter, Jonathan White. Candidates, you each get 45 seconds to respond to the question. Then we will open the floor to rebuttals, which can be taken in any order. The rebuttals will be limited to 30 seconds. Jonathan, you have the first question.
Good evening, candidates. First question tonight. Every election, we ask the candidates to imagine the possibility of the state's savings account running dry. Then, just as it appears that we'll have to face that, Alaska's fortune change either in the oil market or in the stock market. It appears that right now that the fortunes have changed again, and oil has averaged just $12.85 a barrel since the beginning of the fiscal year. At that level, it's going to generate less than $1.5 billion for the year. The stock market is volatile, and the days of double-digit gains are gone for now. We're going to need more than $400 million from the Constitutional Budget Reserve just to balance next year's budget. For the sake of tonight's debate, let's make the assumption that our fortunes won't change and that the cupboard will run dry by the end of your term. You know what the options are: severe cuts or some form of taxes. Which direction will you go? We'll start with you tonight, Ms. Jacobson.
I wouldn't take either direction. In the first place, Alaska is the greatest economy of all the states in the whole good old US of A. 1 jar of smoked salmon is worth more than 1 barrel of oil. Oil is not the only thing that's in the ground here. They can't calculate how much we're worth just in the minerals alone. If we diversify and spend wisely and not spend what isn't there, why would we be bellyaching about big budget cuts and deficit spending and the whole 9 yards? It's ridiculous. I don't know. I don't understand what you based your question on.
Tony Knowles.
The most important thing that we can do to make sure that we protect our savings, that we have a healthy, growing economy, is to produce jobs. That's how we'll pay for our essential services. It's been my top priority to turn around the oil and gas industry, which 4 years ago was really going down, and I think we really turned a corner. But if we don't have enough, we can't let our savings account go dry. The Constitutional Budget Reserve, which is now up to $3.6 billion, we can't let that go dry. And I would look to instituting a revenue to pay for our schools and our public safety and our transportation. First of all, looking to those who don't live in Alaska but work here. We have less of those today than we did 4 years ago, but I would put an Alaska credit income tax to start. I would not use the permanent fund dividend.
John Lindauer.
Well, I certainly wouldn't use the permanent fund dividend at all. I don't really think we have the kind of crisis Jonathan has described. Our Constitutional Budget Reserve alone, under today's interest rates, is earning just about enough to cover that deficit. We do not have a fiscal crisis that necessitates a massive cut and we do not have a fiscal crisis that causes us to panic and impose new taxes. We have a large constitutional budget reserve, we've got uncollected taxes, and they are earning enough alone today to cover the deficit that Jonathan has described. I'm not going to panic and change things in this state.
Ray Metcalf.
John, thank you. I noticed that nobody really answered the question, what would you do if push comes to shove and we have to bite the bullet? If we have to bite the bullet, I think an income tax probably makes more sense than any other option out there. But while I say that an income tax makes more sense, I don't think that we would see that day if our resources are properly managed. As you know, I went to court to try to prevent the giveaway of a $200 million oil lease. They succeeded in giving it away anyway, and it was an oil lease that was worth $200 million. It was given to our current governor's biggest contributors and fundraisers, and if they would have just asked, they'd have written a check for $200 million for that lease. And if we give away we can't give away our treasures and wonder why we're broke. Thank you.
Sylvia Sullivan.
Yes, I also agree. We shouldn't have to be facing your question. What I would do is stop legislation like Mr. Taylor's bill, Senate Bill 159, which Mr. Knowles immediately signed into law. This bill is called a New Business Incentive Program, and it gives away through a grant $3 million to any out-of-state business that comes to Alaska. When we've got all kind of people here who have plenty of talent who would have loved to have that money to start their businesses here in Alaska. This is not Alaska first for these two guys. Thank you.
Robin Taylor.
Well, we have to diversify this economy, and we have to grow this economy. And the legislature has taken that project on and been very successful in it. The legislation you heard about was all created there. We are on target on the fiscal plan established 3 years ago to provide for a smaller and a smarter government in Alaska. By diversifying and expanding our economy, by utilizing the God-given treasure trove of wonderful resources that Alaska has, and doing so in an environmentally appropriate manner, we can have a very bright and a very healthy future. The doomsday predictors are all negativists. Let's be positive about our future. It should be a great one. We have every opportunity. We only need to dream and take advantage of it.
Okay, candidates, now for the sake of rebuttal, I'm going to re-ask the question. This really wasn't a question about what your vision is for the state budget and resources. The question was, if the cupboard goes bare, Jonathan stated it's going to cost $400 million out of the current budget reserve to pay for last year's budget. Oil prices are not rising. You very well could find yourself at the end of your term with no money in your savings account. That's the question. There's no money in your savings account, and you've got a budget to pass in your last year. What do you do? Robin Taylor.
Well, until we created, and by the way, I was one of the people who created the Constitutional Budget Reserve account, and we created it for a rainy day. The rainy day is certainly here. What do? You make certain that you don't just give hollow promises and lip service. You get out there and you grow this economy. We've got 103 million acres of state land. How many people would like to buy a piece of state land? Are we allowed them to? No, we should be. We could sell 500,000 acres a year at $500 an acre. Look at the tremendous revenue that is. We'd still have way more land than any state has.
Anyone else? John Lindauer.
Well, there are many things we can do, ladies and gentlemen, to cut state spending by improving services. For example, we can improve the ferry schedule so that it generates more revenues. We could sell off some of our state lands, develop it for agriculture and mining, oil drilling. We could sell off some of our timber. We have many sources of revenue, and we have many sources of saving. Another great source of saving would be having a medical insurance plan that every person could join if they wanted to, a private plan. It save us $50 or $60 million a year. We have many things we can do.
Disa Jacobson.
Well, with every year 75,000 people coming up here to find work, that means that $25 million in unemployment goes outside. Why isn't it here? Also, the resources are taken out a whole fish instead of making all of these value-added products. Instead of taking gold out of Alaska and shipping it God knows where, There are hundreds and possibly thousands of artisans that could create quality work that could be marketed worldwide. Now, I brought up that little jar of Tlingit-style smoked salmon, and I think you ought to look into it.
And now, Ray, I don't know if you've signaled, yeah, that will work. We'll take Ray Metcalf first and then Sylvia.
John, I think that we should be doing a much better job of managing our resources, and I think there is the long-term solution to our financial problems. 22 years ago, the tiny country of Kuwait, which, by the way, produces less oil than we do and has more citizens than we do, they decided to invest part of their permanent fund in a refinery. And then they invested part of their permanent fund in some filling stations. And they now sell refined products, and they are the wealthiest society on earth because of it. They get $10,000 a year per person in dividends.
Sylvia Sullivan.
Yes, again, right now we have 45 state hatcheries that are producing what nobody wants to buy, pink salmon. I would convert these over to shellfish growing. And the United States is importing $7 billion worth of shellfish into the United States when Alaska has its pristine waters, and we're already producing oysters and clams here. This is a $7 billion industry that only takes 2 years to start. Thank you.
Tony Knowles.
Alaska's economy has diversified over the last 4 years. We've worked hard. The mining industry, because of partnering with industry and incentives, is over $1 billion. The tourism industry has grown 40% the last 3 years. With our new Gateway Alaska project at the International Airport, we're going to continue the enormous growth that we have had there. There's great opportunities now with developing our North Slope gas reserves. This is the way that we have diversified the economy. It's going to be a difficult challenge to continue, but with a strong economy, we'll find the fairest way to pay for the needed services.
All right, thank you, candidates. I appreciate how difficult it is to put your answers into 30 seconds, and I sure appreciate your effort. That's it for the first round of questions. We'll be right back with round 2. Stay with us. And welcome back. We thank you for joining us tonight. We move on to round 2 in our gubernatorial debate. Maria, you have the next question.
The legislature has yet another reprieve to solve the subsistence crisis. As governor, how would you solve this between now and next fall? And each of you, please be specific.
I think that we can solve this problem because the problem today relates primarily to fish. I have no solution for game. In the case of fish, there are adequate stocks of fish for everybody in the state of Alaska to have all the fish they wish to consume. With the right fisheries board, we can allow enough escapement and we can resolve this problem in the real sense that everybody will be able to have all the salmon they wish to eat. Legally and politically, we resolve the question by having a second rule, if you will, which is that in the event of a shortage, you have to eat it where you take it. That will give us the de facto rural priority that the federal government requires. I don't really believe we need a constitutional amendment. I think we can solve this among ourselves if we sit down and try to work it out.
Thank you. Ray Metcalf.
Thank you, John. The difference between Mr. Lindauer's solution and my solution is that I do propose that we have a constitutional amendment. The amendments that were proposed before would have taken away a right, and I did not like the amendments the way they were proposed. I would propose a different amendment that guaranteed everybody's right to fill their freezers before we sell salmon. The Supreme Courts have ruled that personal use comes first. I would like to see it put into the Constitution so that all Alaskans have the right to fill their freezers before we sell fish to other people. Currently, 3% goes into that use, and 97% is sold for commercial uses. It doesn't take a very big dip into that 97% to make everybody whole and everybody happy, and I would like to see it in the Constitution to make sure that it stays that way.
Sylvia Sullivan.
Yes, well, no politician, no legislature can tell the federal government what to do with their land. And because we're not obeying what the federal government and our agreement with the federal government years ago, and the people want to vote, and the legislature refused to allow the people to vote, there is a section in our Constitution already under lawmaking powers, and it states that the people have the same power as the legislature with one exception, and that exception does not apply to this situation. And what I would do is immediately test that with the court and the people would have an immediate vote, a special session for a vote from the people.
Robin Taylor.
Well, our Supreme Court, the top law in our land, just recently indicated that we cannot pass a constitutional amendment as has been proposed by the governor and by many other people. In fact, you have to have a constitutional convention if you're going to do that. That throws the whole Constitution wide open. That's not an acceptable alternative. The delegation in Congress, our delegation now, is utilizing the same words many of us have used for many years. And they're using these words because Alaskans want to control their own destiny on this subject. And that is, we have to have an Alaskan solution, not a solution crammed down our throats from Washington, D.C. I have that solution and have been working on it with many different people. It's not just mine, and that's to bring more local autonomy and more local control of fish and game resources down to the local level. When you do that, you've solved the problem.
Thank you. Disa Jacobson.
The first expectation that anyone would have of the state legislature is for them to live up to the requirements of Title VIII of ANILCA. I didn't say this. Congress did. The essence of Title VIII of ANILCA is to protect the cultures of the Alaska Native people. Those cultures don't belong to us. They belong to our children, and all of us are required to protect them unto the 7th generation. The first thing that the Republican-led legislature can do is show respect for the wisdom of the elders and the knowledge it takes to manage fish and game, not manage the people that use it. This is not a question of food, it's a question of our culture, and I didn't say this. Congress did.
Thank you. Tony Knowles.
The goal of resolving the subsistence issue is to first make sure that Alaska manages the fish and game resources, and second, to recognize the economic and cultural importance of rural preference to rural Alaska. The way in which that we can resolve it is very simple: to allow the Alaska public the opportunity to vote on that issue. I've put together a package by which the congressional delegation, the Republican and Democratic leadership in both the House and the Senate, the vast majority of legislators, the vast majority of Alaskans, the Alaska Federation of Natives, commercial, sports fishing groups, and business leaders all agreed upon a package. We're this close to a resolution, and I would plan to present it to the legislature if given the opportunity to serve next year first off.
All right, let's open it up. Who wants to weigh in? John Lindauer.
Ladies and gentlemen, what the governor said isn't that we're going to solve this with a vote. What the governor just said, he's going to solve this by taking away the culture and traditions of tens of thousands of Native peoples who've moved to urban Alaska. There is no reason to destroy the traditions and heritage and culture of those people who have temporarily come here from the villages. Today, if you're a Native living in Anchorage, you would not be able to go subsistence fishing. And yet a brand new school teacher from Spokane who moves out to the bush would be immediately able to go subsistence fishing. His solution just is not fair.
Who else? Ray Metcalf.
John, I've read the governor's proposal, and the governor's proposal as written would take away the rights that all of you in this room, everybody watching this television station today, enjoys. Every single human being in Alaska, every resident, has the right to subsist. Most people don't know that anybody from urban Alaska can go down to Fish and Game. They can get a subsistence permit. You have the right to 600 fish out of the Copper River. You can use a fish wheel or a net. That right goes away under his proposal, under my proposal. Everybody shares that right. Thank you.
Disa Jacobson.
I have a problem when the Constitution is brought up because I don't know what elements of the Constitution is used to determine what non-subsistence use areas are. I'm also wondering why the state of Alaska, in its wisdom, relinquished management control over 60% of its lands because of 8% of its people who use less than 2 to 4% of the resources at any given time. Get it back at all costs seems to be their motto, at the expense of our culture, and I resent it.
Robin Taylor.
This has been one of the most difficult problems vexing our state for 20 years. The solution, however, has to be found within Alaska. It cannot be dictated to us by the federal government. Our own congressional delegation is now saying those very words. As a consequence, we can sit down as a family of Alaskans around the table and we can decide this issue. I think the key to it is to bring back local control to local communities so that we hear from the elders. It's not just some politician in Juneau deciding who's going to get the fish and who isn't. and we can't destroy the Equal Protection Clause of our Constitution.
I wonder if I can be so bold to ask for a show of hands. I will ask this question and respond in any way that you seem fit. If indeed there was a time of shortage, who among the panel supports a rural preference on subsistence? All right, thank you all very much. With that, we are going to take a break. We'll be right back with another round of questions. And welcome back, everyone. We're on to round 3 of the questions. Steve McDonald, you have the next question.
With Mr. Metcalf this time around. Last February, Education Week, which is a national publication, gave Alaska education a D average overall. Since then, there's been a new funding formula that divided urban and rural Alaska. Parents across the state get concerned when they see grades like that. And they get even more concerned when they perceive that their children are being used as political pawns. As governor, what would you do to raise standards and give teachers the support they need to accomplish that?
Well, we've heard the governor say many times that he's improved education, but if you take a look at the budget, the money that's funded for education has fallen during his term at the helm. And one of the things that I think is important to Alaska is you need to educate Alaskans on the fact that all children throughout the state deserve to graduate with an equal chance to survive in a higher learning institution. And in that means that you need to educate urban Alaska, for all practical purposes, that it's not easy and it's very expensive to deliver education to a small village in a bush where the child you're teaching is learning in what to him is a second language. That is an expensive thing to do, but it has to be done. No child should, education is my number one important thing, and so there we are.
All right, thank you. Sylvia Sullivan.
Yes, I can kind of speak personally to that, since I was a substitute teacher in Valdez for several of the teachers, and it drove me nuts. She had on her teacher's program every 45 minutes we changed classes. We went from math, then we went to English, and these were the grade school kids. They were 9 years old, 3rd grade. And by the time they got their books out, we got on the page and everybody got organized. The 45 minutes was almost up, and then we went into English, and then it was just nuts. I think we ought to look at what's going on in our classroom with our teachers and our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Taylor.
The substance of the question was, we got a D grade from Education Week. I'm surprised we did that well. Many of our institutions are in serious problem. Why is there such an expansion in homeschooling? Why is there such an expansion in private schools and charter schools? Why are people looking for alternatives like correspondence? Because we have a system that needs to be overhauled. We have some wonderful teachers out there that are struggling every day. That's why I initiated the current education funding formula change, and I did it 6 years ago, and then I did it 4 years ago, and then I did it 2 years ago. It turned into Senate Bill 36. Unfortunately, politics got involved when it got to the House. It got changed around. The equity was lost. That equity still needs to be restored. Alternative schools right now are only getting 75% of the funding that a regular school does. We need to change that and change a couple other things in that formula to make it fair.
Thank you. Disa Jacobson.
Alaska could once again brag about having the highest standards in the nation, meaning that the educational formula has been devised by the elders from where the children come from. There's no reason why we can't have a dual education system where the child masters his or her own culture, yet can master technology, science, and physics of the Western world. We can have a dual education system and educational settings that are not high maintenance, high administrative costs, but the quality of teachers would be enhanced. And that's the kind of education I believe we should have in Alaska.
Tony Knowles.
Yeah. If you believe in the future, you'll invest in education. And I've called on Alaskans to take education to a whole new level the last 4 years. With Commissioner of Education Shirley Holloway and business leaders, we held the first statewide education summit in the nation after the national summit. We called upon improved standards, accountability, grading of schools, higher standards for teachers. That's the best way you can get the quality for your current dollars. We also called upon more education dollars to make sure that our children have the opportunity to expand their God-given talents to the best of their ability. We now have mandatory standards in the basics. We have testing, we have remedial work, and I believe that we can bring education to a whole new level of excellence.
Thank you. John Lindauer.
Ladies and gentlemen, under the governor, a man who is supported by the teachers union, they want shorter days, fewer days, lower standards, and less work. Our children deserve the very best. We need to raise our standards, raise the bar dramatically. We need to return to the basics and have every child read and write every day. We can do this. We should look at every school district, get their costs, see what the differential really is in terms of actual costs, and then I, as governor, will see that it is fully funded. There is nothing more important for Alaska than to have a fully funded, high quality education system for everybody.
We have 2 minutes for rebuttal. Tony Knowles.
Well, one of the most important objectives that we have had is to make sure that children are identified at the very earliest stage and given a developmental career profile, so that there will be a reading test at the end of 3rd grade so they can have independent reading, creative writing by the 7th grade with tests, and algebra by the 8th grade. So when they take the exit exam, that their diploma will mean something. Business has to be brought in because to help set the standards, they're going to provide the jobs for the future. This is the way that we've been approaching education. We have it now for the first time in our state's history.
Robin Taylor.
The legislature, not the governor's office, that initiated each one of the things just talked about. We in the legislature are very concerned about the quality of the education we're receiving because many of us believe in an accountable government. An accountable government means you don't test children when they're in the 3rd grade and find out they still can't read. You test them in the 1st grade, identify the problem. In the 2nd grade, identify the problem, and then get them the special tutors and help they need. Not wait till the 3rd grade to do it.
All right, candidates seeing no other responses for rebuttal, we're going to try to save you some time for your own questions. So we're going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, the candidates themselves will be allowed to ask the opponent of their choice a question. And welcome back to the Wilda Marston Theater. Time now for the candidates to ask a question of an opponent of their choice. There will be 45 seconds allowed for a response with a 30-second rebuttal, and then a final 30 seconds for the candidate who was asked the question. Tony Knowles, you have the first question.
I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Lindauer. Mr. Lindauer, one of my initiatives has been to encourage oil development by giving incentives in return for hiring Alaskans, using Alaska businesses, and protecting the environment. And it seems to have worked. One of my initiatives was the North Star lease. You've spoken out against this, and my question is, why are you against the expansion of this important industry?
Well, I think the governor has just misstated my position totally. I'm for the expansion of oil and gas. I think the North Star field should be developed. I didn't like the way he gave away the lease, but since it's now given away, I'm glad that the field's being developed. I would contrast myself with the governor in that when the university lands bill came up to give the university many thousands of acres of lands that could have been used for oil development, mining, and logging, opening things up to expand the industry, he vetoed it. We differ. He wants to lock up the state lands. I want to open them up, and I also would like to trade them to for federal lands that we can use for development, oil, mining, and logging.
Tony Knowles, you have 30 seconds.
Well, the fact of the matter, North Star lease was locked up. It was discovered in 1980, and for 17 years, it was not developed because it was uneconomical. I approached industry, we negotiated a deal, and I gave it to the state legislature to have public hearings and approve. It went to court, and indeed it was approved by the Supreme Court unanimously. The fact of the matter is, the jobs that we see right now today on Ship Creek, building those modules is a new industry. We'll get $400 million of revenues from North Star, and that includes $100 million to the permanent fund. So this is a good deal for Alaska. It's a good deal for Alaska jobs and families.
John Lindauer, you get the last word.
Ladies and gentlemen, I like the North Star development. I'm glad that they're building those modules. I would support that. The basic question, if we're going to have an oil industry in the long run, however, is where are we going to get the lands for exploration? The lands for exploration are either going to be state lands or state lands which we trade to the federal government. We can trade our environmentally sensitive state lands for developable lands from the federal government. We can dramatically expand the oil industry in Alaska, and I would like to do so.
Sylvia Sullivan, you have the next question.
Yes, I'd like to address it to Governor Knowles. Many of your TV ads are talking about how honest and trustworthy you and your office has been. And trust and honesty is a big issue in this election year. I'd like you to explain to the people when, in 1996, when the legislature was out of session, you got 36 illegal regulations offered where they were changing state law. One of them went through. The 35 of them dealt with eliminating unemployment benefits to the workers. The one that I could not fight is still on the books is when Ketchikan union workers, which is why this came up, the unions contacted you and said, my 400 employees are going to be laid off. I want them to get both severance pay and unemployment.
Ms. Sullivan, I hate to interrupt, but please ask your question. This is supposed to be for a question,
How many
not a
other
statement.
regulations are illegal and made into law that you've been enforcing upon the people? Mr. Knowles?
Ms. Sullivan, the state of Alaska has some very strict and very detailed ways upon which the regulations are developed to be in compliance with the law that authorizes those regulations. There is a very open process and a very detailed process, and we have followed that on all of the situations that I can remember. There hasn't been a case to where that there has been, to my knowledge, either a regulation or the process that has been in any way judged against the actions that my administration have taken.
Ms. Sullivan, you have 30 seconds.
Well, that's absolutely, totally false. You know that it is. Right now, the labor statute is still on the books that won't allow anybody, any other employee, non-union, to get both severance and unemployment pay. Here is the regulation. You have both. You have a regulation for the union workers where they can get both severance and unemployment benefits, and you have a state law. They're in total conflict with each other. It's illegal. I testified about it, and I got the 35 killed, except for this one, and it was because you were in the newspaper constantly saying that you were going to do this for the workers.
Thank you. Tony Knowles, you have the last word.
I would just reply that in any interpretation, of course, there may be dispute, and as you point out, there may not be agreement. Again, there is a process for which if actions don't comply with the regulations or with law, of arbitration and other types of mediation in which that can be resolved.
Disa Jacobson, you have the next question.
Yes, to Senator Robin Taylor. During the last legislative session and during the special session on subsistence, many of us that were watching what took place heard time and time again the word equality, management of subsistence in the name of equality, and per the Constitution. So per the Constitution and in the name of equality, would you please define a non-subsistence area?
Well, thank you very much, because I wanted to answer the question on subsistence where we all raised our hands a little differently. When AFN met in Summit in Anchorage, they agreed on 7 guiding principles. I have not found anyone in the legislature that disagrees with this guiding principle, because I agree with it, and it's certainly in my heart, and that is that subsistence is a universal human right. Now, if it is truly a universal human right, then every person is entitled to subsistence, whether they're a person living in Anchorage, Fairbanks, Juneau, or some remote community. Equality, it should not require my definition. It's what this country is founded upon. It's the equal right of each of us to sit here today, your right to vote. It's all of the constitutional protections. We can't forfeit those.
You'll have an opportunity for last word. Disa Jacobson.
Well, then, in the name of equality, will you stand in front of the smokehouses and the fish camps and the small set nets and denying people access by saying equality now, equality tomorrow, and equality forever?
No, I won't, and I never have. What I have said is that we need to remember that our Constitution, our Supreme Court has spoken very clearly on it, says we cannot destroy the Equal Protection Clause. But we have a higher obligation, in my opinion, and that obligation is to sit down as a family and make certain that we protect that universal human right that the AFN told us about. I've not found anyone who disagrees with that, because the freezer in Anchorage can be just as bare as the freezer in a small community.
All right, thank you very much. John Lindauer, you have the next question.
Well, I have a question for the governor. Governor, one of the most contentious issues today on this ballot is the gay marriage amendment, which came about because you refused to sign that bill. Your involvement with this community didn't just start then. If I recall, when you were on the Assembly, it was your ordinance that was introduced to establish equal rights for gays under an affirmative action plan, and these were the days of quotas. And the thought was at the time that this would have required quotas of gay teachers in all of our schools and in our public places. Do you still hold to that position?
Mr. Lindauer, I don't know what you're talking about, because it really doesn't make any sense, and the facts are all wrong. Alaska has had a law since before statehood that establishes the marriage between a man and a woman. And that was the law. That was the law when the legislature passed yet another law that was redundant. And it's on that basis that I let it become law without signature. I feel that people bring these issues up, even though they may not be necessary to implement the mission of the law, purely for political purposes. And I'd like to call a halt to gay bashing, to picking on people that is divisive. I think we're a better state if we understand privacy and tolerance and those kind of approaches.
John Lindauer, you have 30 seconds.
The question had to do with whether you still adhered to your ordinance, which would have established quotas in our schools for people with different sexual orientations. The fact is, the ordinance passed, and if we hadn't had George Sullivan as mayor to veto it, we would have that in effect today. I think this state needs someone such as George Sullivan, someone like George Sullivan, who will see to it that family values are retained in this state.
Tony Knowles, you have the last word.
John, your facts are still wrong. The ordinance that came up in front of the Assembly just had it as a non-discrimination, that you could not discriminate against housing or jobs because of sexual orientation, and along with the various other race and religion issues. That ordinance passed unanimously, the Anchorage Assembly. It was vetoed, and then there was a fight, and the veto was never overridden. But it was passed unanimously, and I think Alaskans don't want to see discrimination.
All right, thank you very much. Ray Metcalf, you have the next question.
Yes, this question is to Governor Knowles. You couldn't understand John. Let's see if you can understand this one. We've been talking about North Star and partnering for the future for a long, long time, all the way down the debate trail. And finally, it occurred to me that it becomes much, much easier to understand what you mean by partnering for the future if you just look back at the history of partnering for the future. And you're back to when you first started partnering for the future as mayor. And I would like to refresh your memory of who financed your first run for governor, Bob Kubik. And I also recall that you were instrumental in shutting down his developments until such time he got the point. And when he got the point, he started raising money for you. And that was how you got your first governor's race off the ground, and he raised enough money for you to run for governor.
Mr. Metcalf, I'm going to ask you to ask the question.
My point is, did you or did you not shut down that person's development until he started raising money, and did he or did he not turn around and raise your money to run for governor?
Mr. Metcalf, you know, you're trying to put some kind of a negative attack on issues that you don't have either the facts are or for the information. And I think what Alaskans want to see out of this election is some discussion of issues that is relevant to their lives, whether or not we're going to have good jobs and how do we get those. And there's differences of opinion between a number of people, and that's in the competition of a good campaign that hopefully we can determine what our future is. But to go back on groundless, senseless, negative personal attacks is not a way with which we can, I think, elevate and utilize a campaign for the best of Alaska.
Ray Metcalf, 30 seconds.
John, this wasn't a difference of opinion. I'd like to refresh your memory here. If you could focus in on this. This was his first partner for the future. While he was mayor, he poured $9 million of your city money straight into this man's pocket, and this man raised enough money. Him and his friends got together and raised enough money so he could run for governor the first time around, and he's been denying it ever since. But he did it. The facts are there, and it's all on a bunch of reporters' desks all over the state. If he wants to deny it, he's going to have trouble doing it tomorrow.
Tony Knowles, you have the last word.
Well, I mean, what more can you say to a situation that is not based on fact, is not relevant, and again, I think lowers the campaign level in this state. I'm proud of the record that I had as mayor. I've worked hard as governor. I don't ever claim to have made all of the right decisions, but I've worked hard for our state and our community, and I'll stand by it.
Robin Taylor, you have the last question.
Thank you. I'll ask it of Governor Knowles. Governor, in November of 1995, in an article in the Anchorage Daily News, you endorsed a long-term financial plan that called for an income tax, an alcohol tax, and called for a reduction of our permanent fund dividends to $700. Is this still your position?
Mr. Taylor, you were heavily involved in the appointment of a long-range financial planning commission, which the legislature appointed 2/3 of the people for. What they did is they laid out a list of approaches that we might take in terms of balancing our budget. And what they made some recommendations for was a plan. I said that this plan needed to be discussed. The honest, open discussion of issues on cutting the budget, expanding the economy, looking at the fairest way to raise revenues for a level of essential services is what we should be doing as elected officials. When I said that the legislature should take a look at that plan and do it, it was part of our commitment when we appointed that commission. House Speaker Gail Phillips, Senate President Drew Pearson, and myself made that commitment that we would discuss what they brought up.
Robin Taylor, you have 30 seconds.
That plan was not endorsed by your legislature, and fortunately it wasn't followed. That's why you got the check you did this year instead of $700. Your actual quote, Governor, in here is, "We finally have a plan that works and balances Alaska's books. I believe the plan deserves the support of Alaskans." I would call that a very strong endorsement of a plan that would have imposed income taxes, alcohol taxes, and limited the permanent dividend fund to $700. It's only because of the legislature that that did not pass.
Tony Knowles, 30 seconds.
Mr. Taylor, you must have been dozing on that first State of the Budget speech I gave before that, when I said there would be no tinkering with the permanent fund without the permanent fund or the dividends without a vote of the people. The way in which that we make the decisions upon which that we balance the budget, but on which we try and grow the economy, educate our children, provide for transportation. This is the kind of discussion that we have to have. The commission was appointed jointly. They put the issues on the table, and I think that we've done a good job in terms of making sure that we've had a growing economy, cutting the budget, and making the important tough decisions. There are other tough decisions ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the candidates. That's the end of that question round. We'll be back with another round of questions from our panel. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. Time for round 5. Maria, you have the next question.
Sullivan. Last December, the U.S. Supreme Court denied Indian country status to the village of Venatai. The village may have lost the battle, but the war certainly isn't over. There are more than 200 federally recognized tribes in Alaska. They're demanding more power in governing their own affairs. Whether it's law enforcement and tribal courts or taxation and wildlife management, as governor, how much authority are you willing to extend to those villages? Ms. Sullivan.
Yes. I find this such a ridiculous question when the tribal governments are in place already, and the troopers know about this, the courts know about it. They've already been able to handle so much of their own. I would offer legislation making a tribal government equal to a municipal government. Everything that your city government can do, so would a tribal government, so that they would have that power and have it recognized.
Robin Taylor.
First off, a tribal government or a city government, a rose is just as sweet no matter what the name. The real essence of the question is, will there be equality? Will there be a Constitution and a Bill of Rights? Will we be able to act in the same fashion as all other American citizens do under that, quote, tribal system? We have to be able to. And if we aren't, then definitely DISA will understand very quickly the difference between the definition of equality. We need to bring more decisions down to the local level. We can do that, but we don't have to do it by setting up two dual systems of justice in the state.
Thank you. Disa Jacobson.
They're not dual, they enhance one another. The 226 tribal governments are protected with plenary powers of Congress. The only restriction that a tribe has is the one that it places on itself. It's ruled by the wisdom of the elders for the benefit of everyone. As your next governor, I would restore the proclamation issued under former Governor Cooper recognizing the 226 tribes. They are not municipalities. They are governments. They are recognized governments. They are protected by Congress. I didn't say that. Congress did.
Tony Knowles.
The federal Constitution establishes the right of Congress to recognize and deal with Indian tribes. While I did not support Indian country, and we won that case, I do believe that we need to work with tribal organizations, and indeed are doing such. From all the way to housing to Head Start, tribal organizations deliver those services. Just recently, I signed an agreement with Tanana Chiefs Conference to deliver the welfare to work services to an area the size of Texas, and Yukon-Kuskokwim Health Corporation for early childhood screening. We can do a lot with this. I do feel that with the Rural Governance Commission that I've approached that we can explore those rights and responsibilities, but it's an important positive tool.
Thank you. John Lindauer.
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe in decentralization, and to the greatest extent possible, under the laws of the state of Alaska, we should allow our tribal organizations to assume government powers so long as they are consistent with our Constitution. It makes little difference to me whether the elected leader of a community is called the chief or the mayor, and whether the elected representatives of the community are called the city council or the tribal council. It's representative government. It's part of our system. There's no reason to be afraid of a group that has a leader called a chief as opposed to a mayor. These are good people. These are good Alaskans. We should celebrate our diversity and our culture under our own Constitution.
Thank you. Ray Metcalf.
Maria, I've had the pleasure of having lived on both sides of the street. I was born and raised in Indian country. I was born on the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana, where I lived until I was 15 years old. I liked it so much I ran away from home. The corporations were developed by the state of Alaska. They began 27 years ago. They were a much better idea. They were the alternative to bringing reservations to Alaska. I can assure you from my personal experience that I've been there, done that. I don't ever want to be on a reservation again. And the corporations have done more in 27 years than the reservations have done in 127 to advance the native culture.
All right, thank you, candidates. I apologize, we have no time for rebuttal because we want to get in one more question. Time is a-running. So stay with us. We'll be right back with one more question. Welcome back to the Wilda Marston Theater. Time for just one last question. Jonathan, you have the floor.
Well, most of the debate in Juneau in the last few years has happened behind closed doors. It's happened with the state, with the governor's office regarding state lands, and it's true in the legislature in virtually every single issue. The public, for the most part, has been cut out of the debate. Mr. Taylor, you've participated in closed caucuses now for many, many years. We'll ask every candidate, but we'll start with you. What can we expect of your administration in terms of openness? And again, I'll ask every candidate to tell us if or will they open the people's government to the people.
Well, first off, on my desk, we're going to have a sign that says the buck stops here. We're going to have open government. By that, we're going to have an open door to the governor's office. You can get in and see me. You can talk to me. You don't have to filter your way through several different people. Open government is not just decisions by the executive that have to be made behind closed doors, and some of those do. I'll give you a candid, honest answer to those questions. You're not going to get a lot of political spin and boutique babble out of me. I'm going to tell you from the heart what's going on, as I always have, John.
Disa Jacobson.
Absolutely. The Green Party never does anything unless it acts through consensus of its members and its people. And that's also traditionally true of the elders from where I come and the elders of the 226 recognized tribes in Alaska. This is done through consensus. I think that it's important to note that the We the People March that took place this year brought people out because issues were being discussed behind closed doors without benefit of their wisdom and their knowledge.
Thank you. Tony Knowles.
Well, there's no question that public decisions are always better when they're made in the open. First of all, you get better information. That's why I've called upon Alaskans all across the state serving on boards and commissions who have, by law, public policies to have open meetings to engage the public in the important issues that face us as Alaskans. I believe very much in dealing with the legislature in an open and frank way where they can, through their hearing process with my commissioners and my departments testifying, that they can come to, I think, a better conclusion than behind closed doors. And I always believe that a governor has to be open. That's why I have my once-a-month open door policy that anybody can come in and talk to me on any subject, and I guarantee you they do.
John Lindauer.
Ladies and gentlemen, better decisions are made when you have as much input as possible. It's important that the governor have a gatekeeper who will leave the gate open. The gatekeeper of the governor is the chief of staff, and it is important that that person be an open person. The one person that I have identified as serving in this next administration, a Lindauer administration, is Emil Noddy, the former state Democratic chairman and AFN president. He is the most qualified man in the whole state. He listens to people. He works with people. He doesn't filter people out. Everybody can get through. I think that we should have a much more open government than we now have, and I intend to have it.
Thank you. Ray Metcalf.
John, if I had my way, there'd be criminal penalties for going behind closed doors and doing the state's business. You just heard the governor tell us, everybody, how important it was to have open meetings and open government. But he got legislation through just recently so he could go into the back room and negotiate how to give away your gas for probably about half what it's worth to his friends, just like he did North Star. When he negotiated the North Star deal, he went behind closed doors and negotiated North Star for a year, and then he came out and sprang this bright idea on the legislature to give away a $200 million lease. I'd like to know what went on behind those closed doors, and if I had my way, there'd be criminal penalties for going behind closed doors and doing the state's business.
Thank you. Sylvia Sullivan.
Yes, I know a lot about the Open Meetings Act. In fact, I'm the president of Alaskans for a Just Society. I filed 2 ethics complaints against all of the legislators for holding closed meetings, because the Ethics Committee is made up of legislators themselves, and they said, oh, it didn't violate any laws. So you have absolutely no one looking out for your rights as the people to participate in your government. I agree. Criminal legislation should be had to stop this closed meetings.
All right, candidates, thank you very much. That's the end of our questions. Take a deep breath. We'll be right back with closing statements. And welcome back. Just enough time now for closing statements. Mr. Taylor, you have 45 seconds.
Thank you, and thank you for having this debate and allowing me to participate. We've been through a real soap opera and a lot of confusion over the last 2-3 months. My dream is a dream that I've been working on for 14 years. A dream that in Alaska can step forward bright and shining into the 21st century. In Alaska, where we're going to protect our permanent fund, we're not going to impose income taxes. We're going to make certain that people have an opportunity where they can get a piece of Alaska land, where our university can have a solid landed base and a good funding mechanism, where recreational users can get out and enjoy this great state. You have the choice. You can turn this state around from a liberal agenda to a mainstream conservative Republican. An honest choice, a choice that's accountable, and a choice that will candidly discuss every issue with you from now all the way through the next 4 years of the Taylor administration. Thank you.
Ray Metcalf.
The only thing that's moving faster in the polls these days than John Lindauer here next to me is me. And if you want 4 more years of Tony, and if you don't want 4 more years of Tony, I'm probably the only viable option up here. I'm on the ballot, and I'm a credible candidate, and I'm moving up rapidly in the polls. For 2 months, I've watched both of these people, John and Tony, try to take credit for something I did 16 years ago. They've both been trying to take credit for protecting the permanent fund. I was the chairman of the committee that decided how your permanent fund would be invested, and it's still the way things are today. They didn't do it. I did.
Thank you very much. John Lindauer.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a few days you'll step into the polls and all the smoke and rhetoric of the campaign will be gone, and you'll need to make a choice, and your choices, I think, are clear. If you're a liberal or an environmentalist, there certainly is a candidate for you who believes in gay marriages and locking up state lands and gun control, and you should vote for him. If, on the other hand, your choice is a more conservative government, no gun control, opening up state lands, and supporting family values, then I'd like to be your candidate, and I'd like to ask you to please vote for me.
Thank you. Disa Jacobson.
When I first entered this race, I felt like I was going up against 1 thoroughbred and 3 stallions, and then another one joined the race, and I felt like a brown mare running up against them because they're well-spoken, they're well-organized, God knows they're well-funded, and I became scared, yet at the same time, I saw the plight of the villages still suffering from the use of honey buckets for water and sewer. Our people are getting sick. I talked to 2 people from Pilot Station that said that the babies are sick, the old people are sick, and they have to open the windows in the school because the lagoon where they dump the honey bucket is in the middle of the village. My question is, how bad does it have to get before we've had enough to say no? And I think Alaska should pull together for it and clean that mess up.
Thank you. Sylvia Sullivan.
Yes. For 4 years, since Tony Knowles came into office, I have watched him, investigated the bills that he has passed, his illegal welfare reform law. I have documented this and sent it to the Anchorage Daily News, who refused to print the legal documents that I have right from the governor himself. So you don't understand, you don't know all of the corruption behind Mr. Knowles. And his talking about the economy being 4.5%. I mean, that is just outrageous, along with him making these illegal laws. KAKM is going to give us an opportunity where we can ask more questions of the candidates, and I hope you tune in then. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're not public TV. Tony Knowles.
It's been an honor to serve you as your governor for the last 4 years. In this election, there is a choice. Alaskans have heard negative attacks, blames, and excuses. That's not a future for our Alaska. I believe by using the values of work, responsibility, family, independence, and tolerance, we will build a better Alaska. I'll continue putting Alaskans first, working for good jobs, better schools, safe, healthy children and communities, and protecting the permanent fund. I believe we can build a ladder of opportunity with the strength, the breadth, and the reach to carry all Alaskans into the next millennium. Lieutenant Governor Fran Ulmer and myself would be honored with your help on November 3rd.
That brings an end to our gubernatorial debate candidates. We know how valuable your time is, and we appreciate you spending it with us this evening.
Tomorrow night, our Campaign 98 coverage continues with 2 live governor's debates. First at 8, the candidates in the Minnesota governor's race, and at 11, a debate from Nevada. You can see live coverage of those debates tomorrow night, beginning at 8 Eastern, here on C-SPAN. In just a minute, more campaign coverage.